My son shoved me down the stairs. I still hear the echo of his voice as it happened, his low, snarling whisper in my ear, just before the push, "I can't wait forever, Mom. You're standing in the way." The betrayal wasn't just in the shove, though the pain of tumbling down 14 steps still lingers in my bones. The betrayal was in his eyes, hungry, cold, glittering with greed. He wanted the house, the savings, everything I had built across 8 long decades of struggle and sacrifice. But here's the twist he never saw coming: I survived. And survival gave me time. Time to set a trap. Time to make sure when he came crawling back in desperation, he'd find out that the very fortune he tried to steal had slipped through his fingers. And if you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because you're about to hear how my own son pushed me down the stairs for money, and how that single act destroyed him completely. I live in a 3-story colonial house on the edge of Richmond, Virginia. White shutters, a wraparound porch, oak trees that groan in the wind. My husband and I bought it 50 years ago when it was falling apart. Together, brick by brick, we rebuilt it. After he passed, I kept it alive on my own. My son, Richard, grew up here. He had everything a boy could ask for: a father who worked himself to the bone, a mother who cooked and cleaned, a home that sheltered him through every storm. But somewhere along the line, Richard's heart hardened. Success wasn't enough for him. He wanted shortcuts. He wanted more than what he'd earned. In his 40s now, Richard had debts stacked as high as these walls: gambling, business schemes gone wrong, cars he couldn't afford. I'd known about the trouble, but I never guessed how far he'd go. That night, I was carrying a basket of laundry down the stairs when I felt the shove. Sudden. Hard. Unforgiving. The basket flew. My body followed. I remember the crunch of my shoulder hitting the wall, the thud of my hip against a step, the final slam at the bottom. And then silence. When I opened my eyes, Richard stood at the top, his face frozen in a strange mix of shock and calculation. He didn't rush down. He didn't help. He just stared. "Mom," he finally said, his voice low, "you need to be more careful. You're not young anymore." And then he walked away. The doctors said I was lucky, no broken bones, just deep bruises and a sprained wrist. They believed me when I said I'd slipped. They had to. What mother accuses her own son of trying to kill her? But I knew. Deep in my soul, I knew. For 3 nights afterward, I lay awake, replaying the moment. His eyes. His whisper. The push. And each time the same thought came to me: he thinks I'm weak. He thinks I'll stay quiet. He thinks he's already won. But I hadn't survived 80 years of hardship to surrender now. A week later, Richard came to me, all smiles, carrying groceries as if he were a dutiful son. "How are you feeling, Mom?" he asked sweetly, setting bags on the counter. "I've been thinking, maybe you shouldn't be alone in this big house anymore. Maybe it's time we did something with it. Something smart. We could sell it. Split the money. I'll take care of you." His voice was syrup, but I tasted the poison in it. "This house isn't for sale," I told him firmly, my wrist still wrapped in bandages. He smiled tightly. "Think about it, Mom. 7 bedrooms? 4 one person? You're rattling around in here like a ghost. Let me help you. Let me handle things." I looked him straight in the eye. "No." For a flicker, just a second, the mask slipped. I saw the greed flare. I saw the hunger gnawing at him. And I knew then that the shove wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. Over the next few days, he grew bolder. He started bringing real estate flyers, laying them casually on the kitchen table. "Look, Mom, this one sold for $2.5 million just last month," he'd say. "Imagine what yours could fetch. You'd be set for life." "I already am set," I'd reply. "Set for what?" His voice would tighten. "To die here alone?" I never answered. Silence became my weapon. But inside, I was building something else. A plan. The lawyer's office was a quiet refuge. Mr. Holloway had handled my affairs for years, a kind man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and steady hands. "He pushed you?" he asked softly after I explained. I nodded. "I can't prove it. But I know." "And you want to make sure he never sees a dime?" "Not a dime," I said firmly. "Not the house, not the accounts, nothing. He's shown me who he is. Now I want to show him who I am. Mr. Holloway leaned back, studying me with a mix of admiration and sadness. We can restructure everything. Place the estate in trust. Redirect assets. He'll be cut out entirely. And I want it done before he makes his next move, I said. He nodded. Consider it done. As I signed the documents, my bruised wrist aching, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just surviving. I was reclaiming control. Back at the house, Richard's games continued. He'd wander the halls, running his fingers along the banister as though it already belonged to him. He'd talk loudly on the phone in the living room about liquidating assets and new opportunities. One night, I overheard him telling someone, once the house is gone, it's smooth sailing. Just a few more days. He thought I was his victim, but I was already his downfall. The turning point came the following Sunday. Family gathered for dinner, my brother, my nieces, a few cousins. Richard stood to give a toast, raising his glass with a smug grin. To new beginnings, he declared. Soon, we'll be celebrating bigger and better things once Mom finally agrees to let go of this house. It's the smart move. For everyone. Murmurs rippled around the table. My brother frowned. My niece looked at me with wide, questioning eyes. I set down my fork, folded my napkin, and said quietly, "This house isn't going anywhere." The room stilled. Richard laughed too loudly. "She's joking. She knows it's time." But the whispers had started. Doubt began to spread. His grip was slipping. And I sat there, calm and composed, letting him hang himself with his own arrogance. That night, after everyone left, he cornered me in the hallway. His face was red, his fists clenched. "You're making me look like a fool," he hissed. "You don't need my help for that," I said calmly. He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't push me, Mom." I looked him square in the eye. "You already did." For the first time, he froze. His confidence cracked. And in that silence, I saw fear. He turned and stormed off, but the walls of his empire were already crumbling. 2 days later, the call came, not to me but to him. I overheard it from the upstairs landing. His voice, usually smooth, was tight with panic. "What do you mean it's gone?" "No, that's impossible. She promised. She's old, she doesn't know what she's doing." I leaned against the banister, listening as his world unraveled. The house wasn't his. The accounts weren't his. Nothing was his. And he hadn't even realized until it was too late. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the fall, the pain, the bruises, the betrayal. And then I thought about the future. He would come to me. Desperate. Broken. Reaching for what he could no longer claim. And when he did, I would be ready. Because this wasn't just survival anymore. This was justice. The bruises on my arm had faded, but the bruise on my heart lingered. Each time I saw Richard's face, I remembered that shove, the force of his hand between my shoulder blades, the cruel whisper in my ear, the thud of my body at the bottom of the stairs. He thought I was fragile, too old to resist, too weak to fight. But every time I caught his eyes, I could tell he was unsettled by how calm I remained. My silence was heavier than shouting. My composure was sharper than any blade. Still, his arrogance grew. A few days after the Sunday dinner fiasco, he barged into the living room with his laptop. He plopped it down on the coffee table in front of me, opening spreadsheets and property valuations as though I were one of his clients. "Look, Mom," he said, his voice falsely cheerful. "The market's hot right now. If we list the house this week, you could get 7 million easy. Maybe more. You'd never have to worry again." I sipped my tea slowly, my cardigan snug around my shoulders. "I'm not worried now," I said. He clenched his jaw. "You don't understand. This is opportunity. Don't you want to leave me something?" "I already have," I said softly. His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was sitting quietly in Mr. Holloway's office, sealed with a notary's stamp. Later that evening, I walked through the mansion, my hand trailing along the banister where his shove had begun. I paused at the top of the stairs, staring down at the place where I had fallen. He wanted this house to be his triumph. But it would be his downfall. I could already sense his desperation growing. His phone calls grew louder, more frantic. I'd hear him pacing the kitchen at midnight, hissing into the receiver, "I just need a little more time. Once the house sells, I'll pay you back, I swear." Whoever was on the other end didn't sound convinced. 2 mornings later, he stormed into the kitchen, slamming papers down on the counter. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he spat. I looked up from my oatmeal calmly. "What do you mean?" "These." He shoved the documents toward me, printouts of my trust paperwork, copies he must have stolen from my desk drawers. "You think you can just cut me out? You think you can leave me with nothing?" I stirred my oatmeal. I didn't think. I decided. His face went red, a vein throbbing at his temple. For a moment, I thought he'd strike me right there in the kitchen. But he didn't. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled in its frame. I finished my breakfast slowly, each bite steady. His fury was proof I had chosen correctly. That evening, my brother Henry stopped by. He was a quiet man, grayer now than I remembered, but his eyes still sharp. He had heard whispers, about Richard boasting of a coming fortune, about my supposed agreement to sell. "Margaret," he said gently as we sat on the porch swing, "tell me the truth. Are you safe?" I looked at him, my hands folded neatly in my lap. "I'm safer than Richard realizes." Henry studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Because he's been talking too big, and big talk draws big wolves. If he's in trouble, they'll come knocking." "I know," I said softly. The porch creaked beneath us, the dogs lying at my feet. The sun dipped low behind the oak trees, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. Richard didn't realize it, but the walls were closing in. The next day, the wolves arrived. A sleek black car pulled into the driveway, 2 men stepping out in tailored suits. They weren't realtors. They weren't neighbors. They were debt collectors, and they carried themselves with the casual menace of men who never left empty-handed. I watched from the window as Richard greeted them nervously on the porch. His smile was too wide, his laughter too forced. "Just a few more days," I heard him say. "The house is selling. I'll have the money." The taller man leaned in close, his voice low but firm. "Few more days is all you've got." They left as quickly as they came, the black car disappearing down the street. Richard came inside pale and sweating. He didn't see me standing in the hallway. I retreated to the library, closing the door softly behind me. The fire crackled low as I sat at the desk, pulling out the folder once again. "Not a dime," I whispered to myself, running my fingers across the seal. Not a dime. That night, Richard drank. I heard the clink of bottles in the kitchen, the heavy shuffle of his feet across the tiles. Around midnight, he staggered into the living room, muttering to himself. "Ungrateful, selfish, it's mine, all mine." I stayed in my room, listening, my hand wrapped tightly around my rosary beads. My heart ached for the boy he once was, the boy who used to sit on this very floor, building towers with wooden blocks, laughing when they toppled. But that boy was gone. What remained was a man hollowed out by greed. 2 days later, I caught him trying to break into my desk again. "What are you looking for?" I asked from the doorway. He froze, his hands halfway inside the drawer. I was just checking your bills." "My bills are none of your concern," I said firmly. His face twisted. "You think you're so smart. You think you've beaten me. But you're nothing without me, old woman." I stepped closer, my eyes never leaving his. "And you're nothing because of you, Richard. Don't you see? You've already lost." For a moment, he trembled, rage shaking his hands. Then he shoved past me, storming down the hall. I stood there, calm, composed. Inside, I felt sorrow, but also a growing certainty. His desperate call was coming. It was only a matter of when. Sunday arrived again, and with it another family gathering. Richard strutted into the dining room, his suit pressed, his hair slicked back. He raised his glass, smiling wide. "To opportunity," he declared. "The house will be gone soon. We'll all be celebrating." Whispers rippled again. Cousins exchanged glances. My niece leaned toward me, her voice low. "Is it true, Aunt Margaret?" I shook my head gently. "Not yet." The whispers grew louder. Doubt clouded the room. Richard's smile faltered. I set down my fork, folded my napkin, and looked at him. You speak as though decisions have been made. They haven't. His face flushed red. Stop undermining me. But it was too late. The family had seen the cracks. His empire of lies was collapsing. And I didn't have to lift a finger. That night, he confronted me again, his voice shaking with rage. You'll regret this, Mom, he hissed. When I lose everything, it'll be your fault. I looked at him calmly. No, Richard. When you lose everything, it'll be yours. He froze, his lips trembling, then turned and slammed the door. I returned to my room, closing the folder one final time. The plan was complete. The trap was set. All that remained was the fall. And fall he would. Because greed is a staircase. You climb fast, you shove others aside, you think you'll reach the top. But one wrong step, and everything comes crashing down. The days after that family dinner grew heavier, like storm clouds pressing down on the house. I could feel Richard's desperation thickening in the air, every slammed door, every frantic phone call, every glare he shot me across the hall. He had shoved me once, but now he was shoving against reality itself. He thought if he pushed hard enough, the world would finally give him what he wanted. But greed doesn't bend the world, it breaks the one holding it. It began with the phone calls. I would hear him in the study at all hours, pacing, his voice low and sharp. I told you I'll get the money, he hissed one evening. It's tied up. My mother's just being stubborn. Once the house sells, you'll have every penny. Silence followed, then his voice rose, tinged with panic. No, you don't understand. This isn't how it ends for me. Just give me a little more time. I sat in the library with my tea, listening through the thin walls. His words were daggers aimed at me, but the blade turned back on himself. He didn't know it yet, but the house was already out of his reach. And every lie he spun only tangled him deeper. The collectors returned. Another black car, this one parked at the curb with the engine running. Two men stepped out, different from the first but carrying the same aura of danger. They didn't come inside this time. They waited. Richard paced the porch like a trapped animal, hands flailing as he tried to convince them. I could only hear bits of it through the window. Couple more days. I swear, it's practically done. One man leaned closer, his face hard as stone. Couple more days is all you've got. Then they left, leaving Richard pale and sweating, his shirt clinging to his back. I watched from behind the curtain, unseen. My heart ached, not out of pity, but out of the bitter truth. Greed had made my son into prey. That night, he staggered into the kitchen, his hands trembling as he poured himself a drink. He didn't notice me sitting at the table in the dim light. They're circling, he muttered to himself, gulping whiskey. I just need that house. I just need her to break. I spoke quietly, my voice cutting through the silence. The house isn't yours, Richard. He jumped, nearly spilling his drink. His eyes blazed. Why are you doing this to me? I'm not doing anything to you, I replied evenly. You're doing it to yourself. He slammed the glass down, shards of amber liquid spilling across the counter. I'm your son. You owe me. I rose slowly, steady on my feet despite the ache in my hip. I owe you nothing but the truth. And the truth is you've lost. His mouth opened, but no words came. He stormed out instead, the echo of his footsteps hollow against the tile. The next morning, my niece Clara came by. She was in her 20s, bright-eyed, full of concern. Aunt Margaret, she said softly, people are talking. Uncle Richard told everyone you're selling the house. He said it's already done. I smiled faintly, sipping my coffee. Then he's selling lies. She frowned. He looked desperate, like someone chasing shadows. I touched her hand gently. Don't worry about me, Clara. Worry about him. He's building a fire he can't put out. Her eyes widened at my words, but she said no more. She left me with a hug, whispering, "You're stronger than he thinks." Later that day, Richard tried a new tactic. He followed me through the house, his voice softer, almost pleading. "Mom, we could start fresh. You could come live with me and Jenna. The kids would love it. You wouldn't be alone anymore." I stopped in the hallway, turning to face him. "And what happens to this house?" He hesitated, the mask slipping. We sell it. It's just a house, Mom. 4 walls. Money is what matters. I shook my head. No, Richard. 4 walls don't hold money. They hold lives. Memories. Love. And you've already sold those. His jaw clenched, his charm collapsing back into anger. You're making a mistake you'll regret. I looked him in the eye, calm and unshaken. No, you are. The following Sunday, whispers filled the church again. I could feel eyes on me as I sat in the pew, my Bible resting in my lap. People leaned close to each other, murmuring, "Is it true she's selling?" Richard said it's a done deal. At the end of the service, a kind woman touched my arm gently. "Margaret, tell me, is it true?" I smiled faintly. "Not yet." The words spread like wildfire. By the time Richard strutted out of the building, half the congregation was looking at him with doubt instead of admiration. His face tightened as he realized the tide was turning. His lies were unraveling in public now. And all I had to do was say 2 words. That evening, he confronted me again in the hallway. His voice was shaking, not just with rage but with fear. "You're making me look like a liar," he shouted. "You don't need me for that," I replied calmly. He stepped closer, his breath hot, his fists trembling. "You'll regret this, Mom. When everything falls apart, it'll be on you." I didn't flinch. "No, Richard. When everything falls apart, it'll be on the man who shoved his own mother down the stairs for money." His eyes widened, fury and shame colliding in his face. For the first time, he couldn't hide from what he'd done. He spun away, slamming his door so hard the frame rattled. I stood there in the quiet hallway, my hand resting on the banister he'd once tried to kill me with. My heart was steady. My resolve was unshaken. The desperate call was coming. I could feel it. And come it did, sooner than even I expected. 2 days later, I woke in the night to the sound of Richard's voice echoing through the house. He was on the phone in the kitchen, his words frantic, broken. "I lost everything," he was saying. "The investors pulled out, the debts, they're calling it all in. I need money now. Do you understand me? Now." Silence. Then his voice dropped, filled with terror. "Don't come here. I'll fix it. I'll find a way." I stood at the top of the stairs, my hand resting on the banister, listening to his empire collapse in whispers and threats. And for the first time, I saw it clearly, the fall had already begun. All I had to do was wait for him to hit the bottom. Because greed is a staircase, and Richard had shoved me down once, thinking I'd never rise again. But now it was his turn to tumble. And no one would be there to catch him. The fall of a man rarely happens in silence. It comes with cracks, with echoes, with the unmistakable sound of pride shattering against the ground. And with Richard, I heard every crack. The collectors came again on a Tuesday morning. This time, they didn't linger at the curb or whisper on the porch. They knocked on the mansion door, sharp and loud, the sound vibrating through the walls. I was in the library when I heard Richard's panicked footsteps rushing down the hall. He opened the door just enough to slip outside, but their voices carried. "You promised," one of them said, his tone flat, dangerous. "Time's up." Richard's voice cracked. I just need more time. I told you the house." The second man cut him off. "We've heard enough about the house. If you don't deliver by Friday, you'll regret it." The door slammed shut. Richard leaned against it, his face pale, his breathing shallow. He didn't see me watching from the staircase. His empire wasn't crumbling anymore. It was collapsing. That evening, he tried to act normal, clattering pans in the kitchen, whistling off-key as though the sound of his own cheerfulness could drown out the wolves at the door. But I noticed his hands shaking when he set the plates down. I saw the way his eyes darted to me, then away again. Finally, he slammed his fork onto the table. "You could fix this, Mom. All of it. With one signature." I looked at him steadily. "And why would I?" His voice rose. "Because I'm your son." I set my napkin down gently. "And you shoved me down the stairs." The words struck him like a slap. He froze, his jaw working soundlessly. "You thought I'd forget," I continued softly. "You thought I'd swallow it like all your lies. But I remember. And so will you." He pushed his chair back violently, storming from the room. But the truth was out now. Spoken aloud. And he couldn't run from it. By Thursday, the whispers had spread beyond the family. At the grocery store, neighbors glanced at me, their eyes full of curiosity and pity. "I heard Richard's in trouble," one woman murmured as I passed. "They say he owes more than he can ever pay," another replied. "And wasn't he bragging about the house? Something about selling it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Their words followed him wherever he went, clinging to his polished shoes like mud. The next Sunday at church, Richard walked in late, his suit wrinkled, his face drawn. He tried to smile, to shake hands, but people pulled back. They had heard enough. His mask was cracking in public now. I sat in the back pew, my silver hair pinned neatly, my cardigan buttoned, my Bible resting in my lap. When the service ended, a kind man asked me gently, "Is it true, Margaret? Is your house being sold?" I smiled faintly. "Not yet." The words spread again, like ripples on water. Richard stormed out, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing with humiliation. That afternoon, the family gathered for dinner again, though the air was thick with tension. Richard arrived late, his children in tow, his wife silent beside him. He raised his glass once more, forcing a grin. "To survival," he said weakly. "Because no matter what anyone says, I always land on my feet." The cousins exchanged glances. My brother Henry cleared his throat, his voice calm but firm. "Richard, enough with the speeches. We've all heard what's going on. It's time you told the truth." Richard's smile faltered. "What truth?" "That you've been lying," Henry said flatly. "That you told everyone the house was yours to sell. That you made promises you couldn't keep." The table went silent. All eyes turned to Richard. His face flushed crimson. "It is mine to sell," he shouted. "I'm her son. It'll all come to me anyway." I set down my fork. "Not anymore." The words landed heavy, final. Murmurs erupted around the table. His children stared at him wide-eyed. His wife lowered her head. Richard shoved back his chair, his voice cracking. "You're killing me, Mom. You're destroying me in front of everyone." "No, Richard," I said softly. "You destroyed yourself the moment you put your hands on me." Gasps circled the table. Whispers swirled. Richard stood there trembling, his chest heaving, his face twisted in rage and shame. Then he stormed out, leaving the room in stunned silence. That night, the call came. I heard it through the walls, his voice raw, desperate, broken. "I lost everything," he sobbed into the phone. "The investors pulled out, the creditors won't wait. They're going to ruin me. Please, I need more time. I need." His voice cracked, dissolving into a strangled cry. "I'll find the money. I'll make her give it to me." I sat in my room, my hands folded calmly in my lap. His desperation was the sound of justice, slow and heavy, coming to claim what greed had built. He didn't know it yet, but the next call he made would be to me. Friday morning dawned gray and heavy, rain tapping softly against the windows. I found Richard in the kitchen, his head in his hands, the phone lying silent on the counter. He looked up when I entered, his eyes hollow, his face ashen. "Mom," his voice cracked. "They're going to take everything. The house, the cars, even the kids will see it. I can't stop it." I poured myself a cup of tea, my hands steady. "And what do you expect me to do?" "Help me," he pleaded, his voice rising. "Sign the house over. Give me the money. Please, I'm begging you." I set the cup down gently. "Begging is what comes after shoving your mother down the stairs." Tears welled in his eyes, but I didn't flinch. His desperation couldn't erase his betrayal. "You'll see," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You'll regret this. When they take me down, you'll regret not helping." I shook my head. "The only regret I carry is you." That evening, as the storm outside grew stronger, Richard's phone rang again. He answered in a trembling voice, pacing the living room. "I told you, I'll have it tomorrow. I just need," his voice broke. "No, please don't come here." Silence. Then a sob. He dropped the phone, collapsing onto the couch, his hands covering his face. The sound of his weeping filled the room, heavy and broken. I stood in the doorway, my silver hair catching the lamplight, my cardigan soft against my shoulders. The boy I had raised was gone. The man before me was a hollow shell, consumed by his own hunger. And the final act was coming. Because when greed takes everything, the only thing left is the desperate call. The rain had not stopped since morning. Sheets of water blurred the windows, the mansion groaning under the storm's weight. It felt fitting. The sky itself seemed to mirror the collapse unfolding inside these walls. Richard hadn't slept. I could hear him pacing all night, muttering to himself, his phone lighting up with calls he ignored. By the time dawn broke gray and heavy, he was a wreck, his shirt untucked, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling. At noon, the call finally came. I was sitting in the library, my tea cooling beside me, when the phone rang sharp and loud. Richard lunged for it, his voice cracking as he answered. "Hello? Yes, it's me." A pause, then his tone turned frantic. "Please, just give me more time. I swear, I'll get it. The house, it's worth millions. I'll have her sign it. His eyes flicked to me as though I were already holding the pen. Then the voice on the other end must have cut him off, because Richard's shoulders sagged, his face crumbling. "No, please don't. Not in front of my family. Don't do this to me." The silence on the line was heavier than thunder. Finally, Richard whispered, his voice broken. "Fine. I'll call her. I'll beg her." He hung up, the phone slipping from his sweaty hands onto the carpet. For a long moment, he stood frozen, staring at me as though I were both his executioner and his savior. Then he dropped to his knees. "Mom," he gasped, crawling toward me. His hands shook as he grabbed the hem of my skirt. "Please. I'm begging you. You have to help me. They'll ruin me. They'll take everything. Please sign the house over. Please." I looked down at him, my silver hair catching the dim light, my cardigan soft against my shoulders. My expression was calm, steady. "You shoved me down the stairs," I said softly. Tears streaked his face. I was desperate. I didn't mean it, I was angry, I wasn't thinking. "Please, Mom. I'm your son. Don't let them destroy me." "You destroyed yourself," I replied. His sobs grew louder, filling the library, echoing against the shelves of books that had stood longer than his pride. "I'll change," he promised, his voice hoarse. "I'll do better. Just give me one more chance." I leaned forward slightly, my eyes never leaving his. "Do you know what chance means, Richard? It means trust. And you broke it the moment you pushed me. You don't get another." He collapsed onto the carpet, his body shaking with despair. And then came the knock. The doorbell rang sharp and firm, cutting through his sobs. He froze, his eyes wide with terror. "No," he whispered. "They wouldn't, not here." But they would. And they had. I rose slowly, walking past him toward the door. The storm outside roared as I opened it. Two men stood there, rain dripping from their coats, their faces hard. Behind them, a third figure appeared, my brother Henry, his expression grim. He must have heard, must have seen, must have followed the whispers to their inevitable end. "Afternoon, ma'am," one of the men said politely but firmly. "We're here to settle Mr. Hale's debts." Henry stepped forward, his eyes flicking to Richard crumpled on the floor behind me. "So it's true." The room filled quickly after that. Neighbors drawn by the storm of gossip, cousins arriving at the wrong moment, family gathering in the foyer with whispers thick as smoke. Richard's humiliation, once private, was now public. And there was no escape. Richard staggered to his feet, his face blotched with tears. "Please," he begged the men, his voice cracking. "Give me one more chance. I'll pay, I swear. Just not here. Not in front of them." The taller man shook his head. "Your time's up." Richard turned to me, his eyes wild. "Mom, say something. Tell them you'll sign. Tell them you'll save me." I folded my hands calmly in front of me. "The house is not yours to sell. It never was." Gasps rippled through the family. My niece Clara stepped closer, her eyes wide. "Aunt Margaret, what do you mean?" I met her gaze steadily. "I placed the estate in trust months ago. Every penny, every brick, every acre, protected. Richard has no claim." Whispers surged. The creditors nodded grimly, their job confirmed. Richard's knees buckled. No, he whispered, his voice hollow. No, it was supposed to be mine. All of it. Mine. I stepped closer, my voice firm but quiet. You thought greed would build you a kingdom. But greed builds nothing. It only devours. And now it has devoured you. The room was silent except for the storm outside. Then Henry spoke, his voice heavy. You bragged to everyone, Richard. You lied. You brought this on yourself. The cousins nodded, the neighbors whispered. His wife turned her face away, ashamed. His children clung to her skirt, confused, frightened. And Richard stood there, stripped of everything but his shame. He turned to me one last time, his voice raw. You're my mother. How could you do this to me? I met his gaze, unflinching. How could you do this to me? His lips trembled. He had no answer. The men stepped forward, guiding him gently but firmly toward the door. He stumbled, his shoulders slumped, his eyes empty. As they led him out into the storm, the doors of the mansion closed behind him with a heavy, echoing thud. And for the first time, I felt peace. That night, I sat on the porch swing, the rain finally easing, the air smelling of wet earth and new beginnings. The dogs lay at my feet, the house standing tall and proud behind me. My silver hair caught the fading light, my cardigan warm against the evening chill. The world was quiet again. Richard had thought shoving me down the stairs would erase me, would make me weak, would give him everything. But greed had made him blind. And when the desperate call came, it wasn't his salvation. It was his end. So if you're watching this, remember, betrayal may shove you down, greed may strip you bare, but dignity cannot be destroyed. Sometimes, the sweetest justice is not revenge, but watching those who tried to ruin you collapse under the weight of their own choices. Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me where you're watching from. Because maybe you've been shoved aside, betrayed by the ones you love. But hold on. One day, their desperate call will come, and you'll be the one who doesn't answer.